गुड इवनिंग एंड वेलकम टू गना शॉट. गना शॉट में आप सबका स्वागत है. Today we're going to have a very exciting discussion on what after Sharm el-Sheikh. And to discuss this topic, I have a very illustrious panel of speakers with me. And starting from clockwise, Gen Gautam Moorthy, Ambassador Trigunayat, Gen Ata Hasnain, and Vice Adm Chopra. At the outset, gentlemen, good evening. Happy Deepavali to you and happy Deepavali to all the audience and welcome back to Gunner Shot. There's a crib from everyone and I'm probably to be blamed for it that I have not had a one-to-one with any of you for a long time. And we will rectify it in future. But at the outset, a good evening and a happy Deepavali to all of you for this important topic. Right. Now, what we'll do is I'll just lay out what's happened, I think, and then we'll get going. Okay, let's go to back. What after Sharm el-Sheikh? Right. The thing is this. What happened? What's happened so far? The thing on the left, that is the Gaza map as it is unfolding. The blue line here was the line in which the IDF was there at the early stages. The yellow line is the first line of withdrawal. And that is where the Israeli forces are. The Gazans are inside, so is the Hamas. And the third red line is that line which Israeli defense forces have to withdraw when the stabilization force comes into play. And finally, they have to get back to this buffer zone and all that, but that's a long way off. We are still talking of the yellow line which has been hatched by Trump and company. Right? What are the issues involved? Ceasefire, partial Israeli military pullback, hostage exchange, and aid. Ceasefire was done, being violated repeatedly. I mean, there's no question. Even today, there was a ceasefire violation. The military pullback has happened, but there's no one to monitor this at anything. So raids across are taking place. Right, hostage exchange has taken place. All the live hostages have been returned back to Israel, and a whole lot of Palestinians who've been jailed by Israelis have been returned back. But the issue is about 13 or 14 remains of hostages who have deceased are yet to be returned back to the Israelis. And apparently, it seems that the Palestinians don't even know now at where they've been buried. They know, but the terrain has changed. Aid is flowing in intermittently. It's gone in a big way, and it's gone in a pretty awful way. This is what aid looks like in Palestine today, right? Pretty awful, pretty sad also to a large extent, right? And to that extent, the normal people of Gaza have suffered quite a bit, and they have suffered a lot of casualties. There's no going saying that, but that doesn't take away from the fact that Hamas was barbaric 2 years back. Right. Now, what are the issues which we look ahead after Sharm el-Sheikh? We look ahead, will the ceasefire hold? What about the ISF? The ISF is supposed to come and stabilize the situation and all that. What is the composition, timeline, funding, task? No one knows. What is the future of Hamas? Will it be de-armed? Will it get into the mainstream? Will they be allowed to survive? We don't know. What is the future of Gaza and Palestine issue itself? Will the West Bank and the East and Gaza Strip will go under the Palestinian Authority? You know, two-state solution, half-a-state solution, all kinds of things are there. And of course, the major thing is all this is being carried out outside the mandate of the UN. Right? So, how long? Who will fund this whole story? And where are we going ahead in this? Will this entire thing hold, or was it only a great photo op and event op for President Trump? And what followed, of course, in Sharm el-Sheikh is that we saw that spectacle of the Prime Minister of Pakistan literally licking, Trump all over. And, that was quite a spectacle. That was only humorous part of the whole story. Otherwise, a grim story. Whether it fail or not. Whether it fails or not, is a different story. But one thing we have to give credit to Mr. Trump, that at least the hostage exchange has taken place and something is happening. Whether it is successful or not, it is one step forward. Whether it will go two steps back is to be seen. And that's why we are here to talk about all this. I'll first request General Gautam Moorthy, sir, please carry on your view. Give your opening views about this whole story for about 5 minutes each. And then we will get back to each one of you for your detailed issues on specific issues. Yeah, Gautam Moorthy, sir, over to you.
Thank you, General Shankar. Good evening to you. Good evening to my fellow panelists and to the viewers. Happy Deepavali, as you said. And I think you've made a fantastic introduction that basically the ceasefire has been good. It has been good because it brings to a halt 2 years of really intense warfare. We have seen the killings, the brutal killings, and in today's televised world with the social media, it is brought to us the pain and the suffering of the Palestinian people. Nobody can be immune to that. We all feel for them. But the ceasefire remains fragile and it is contested. Now, the origin of the ceasefire is Trump's 20-point peace plan, which was formally accepted both by Israel and Hamas between 9th and 10th October after months of pressure from the US, from Egypt, and from Qatar. Qatar has played a very, very major role in this. So it came into force on 10th of October at noon local time. And as General Shankar has already pointed out, they've withdrawn to the yellow line. They're controlling 53% of Gaza, while Hamas is controlling the rest. And as Hamas has released 20 living hostages, one got released, and 28 are being returned gradually. One body was even released today. Israel has also begun releasing 1,950 Palestinian prisoners, including women and children. Now, the ceasefire, as I said, continues nominally. Nominally, though both Israel and Hamas accuse each other of repeated breaches. In the past 48 hours, Israeli airstrikes have killed at least 45 to 50 people, according to Hamas-run agencies. Because Palestinian gunmen attacked on Sunday and killed 2 Israeli soldiers. So Hamas claims that the Rafah attack was not carried out by them, but it was carried out by some other people and not by the Hamas. Anyway, Israel is maintaining that military control. Vice President Vance arrived today to stabilize the ceasefire and advance the second phase of Trump's peace plan, which includes a demilitarized technocratic administration in Gaza. Qatar's emir condemned Israeli violations of the truce in a speech to the Shura Council and he called for adherence to human rights. Apart from that, aid convoys are pitiful. They're all ready, but there are only 2 crossings and it is far below what is needed. So how are we looking at it now? The ceasefire is an acute threat. Let us have no illusions about it. There is sporadic fighting around the border areas, continued bombings by Israel. A foreign mediation is underway to prevent the collapse. As of 4 p.m. today, Gaza time, the truce persists only in name but not in practice. Now, Hamas did not want to release the hostages earlier because that they felt was the only leverage they had against the Israelis. But now that all the living hostages are returned, and as General Shankar said, even they do not know where the dead ones are. But the US has publicly warned Hamas not to resume the attacks. And WHO and UN are coordinating the humanitarian ceasefire. The next 2 stages are very important: the establishment of an international stabilization force, the large-scale reconstruction, humanitarian aid delivery. So, what is this truce actually offered? What is the ceasefire offered? It has offered a path out of this absolute dead end that we were seeing. Israel is deeply isolated, let us face it. Ambassador Trigunayat will speak more on it. Hamas, it's an existential question whether they will remain. They said they will not disarm. General Shankar has spoken about it. Will they continue political resistance? What form of resistance how will the resistance take place? killing of more Israelis isn't going to help Israeli civilians. So let us see this peace summit, uh, which has laid the groundwork, and let us see how it progresses. That's all for now. More a little later. Oh, back to you,
Thanks a
Dinesh.
lot, sir. I think you laid the whole thing out, what's happened and what's the current situation. Like I said, the peace summit has laid the ground, but the path ahead is what is
Yes.
more important, right? And out of a dead end, the path out of a dead end. That's the words you use. So I'd request General Hasnain, sir, you've been there, you've known about this, and I mean, you know this area well, and we've spoken about this earlier. Where do you think this whole story is going ahead at this point of time, given the situation we're in?
Thank you, John Shankar. Thank you very much, and happy Diwali to all our viewers, to my fellow panelists. Uh, I think General Murthy has set it out very well, and so has General Shankar. And there isn't really too much to add to it as such, but just a few nuances I may just like to contribute. Firstly, do watch this fantastic film on Netflix called Oslo, right?
Yes.
It will show you the complete Oslo Accord, the signature of the
I've
Oslo
seen it.
Accord 1992, and it will show you how quietly this whole process was carried out at that time. Not in the manner of loud diplomacy that you're seeing in Sharm el Sheikh today. If you want to see peace established, I'm not saying Oslo Accord was very successful, but the manner, you see, there were academics who were behind it. They were not presidential candidates or presidents of the United States who were doing the whole thing. It was done being instigated, triggered only by academics. So ordinary people. And there was a tremendous amount of give and take in this whole thing, a level of seriousness which had been established. That level of seriousness does not seem to exist today to find peace. To my mind, the manner in which the body chemistry, both sides, is appearing is Hamas essentially wants it to stop because enough is enough at the moment in terms of violence. For the Israelis, uh, also once again having mobilized troops to the strength to the tune of 300,000 is not something for a 9-10 million nation to be able to afford very easily. And then the kind of allegations that Israel is suffering internationally at the moment is not, they are being taken to the cleaners. 150 nations around the world have virtually recognized the Palestinian Authority. So it's not a very happy situation for Israel. To my mind, both sides have looked at it very transactionally. There is nothing transformational about this, and they are all waiting to see and examine potential openings which will happen as the process goes along. And we are seeing already infringements taking place in a huge way. Having said that, to my mind, just a reference to what the trigger was. October the 7th, what really brought about October the 7th? Which can restore a situation back to something of what it was before. To my mind, the Abraham Accords were one issue which came into this in a big way. If I was sitting in Palestine at that particular time, the perception that I would have gained is I'm becoming irrelevant. I mean, there is a conflict going on in which I am subjected to the conflict, but I am not being asked anything about the conflict. It is the rest of the world deciding what to do about it, right? The UAE on one side, the United States on one side, Israel on one side, right? And similar other states, Saudis would probably have joined in subsequently at a later stage. I think the Abraham Accord sent home a clear message to the Palestinians or to the Hamas as such among the Palestinians that they had to do something and do something drastic. Now you may recall what happened in 1973. A very similar situation had arisen at that time when President Anwar Sadat felt that the whole issue of the Sinai was now had become completely irrelevant. And therefore, Operation Badr, many times known also by its other name, Sharara, the spark. It was essentially to spark a concern of the world, to bring the world back to focus on the Palestinian issue, the Palestinian tragedy as such, and thereby hope that something can be restored in terms of peace between Egypt or between the Arabs and Israel at that time. This is something exactly what happened on October the 7th. 2 years down the train, after the Hamas had not catered for a thing like this, Israelis perhaps also did not realize that 2 years of bloodletting, the manner in which they have gone about their military involvement in Gaza, would ultimately lead to nothing. There is no victory today. There is no one, no victor, no vanquished as far as this is concerned. But this is hybrid conditions. And in such situations, to start designating victory from the number of people you have killed is the incorrect way. So I think we are actually just in a very transactional way, we have established a ceasefire. All the requirements, now most of us who have served in the United Nations, etc., know for clear that when you have a ceasefire, to bring about a certain peace, you need a exclusion force, something which is going to be a separation force, which is still not come into being. We don't know when it will come into being. We don't know what the composition of that is going to be. It's not an easy thing to immediately establish. Why was the United Nations not brought into it? Does there no trust in the United Nations at all? Why have an organization like the United Nations? There are two peacekeeping missions already in this area. UNDOF in the Golan Heights, and there is UNIFIL in Lebanon. Both these forces have not done a bad job. Why not trust another such force, multinational force, to come in and perhaps establish? It will be a far more neutral organization and could be perhaps trusted by Hamas or both sides to a much greater extent. Humanitarian aspects you've opened up, no doubt. They've opened it up with the manner you're seeing the photographs. No control, no methodology to this entire thing, and then Hamas itself, the surrender of weapons. Just cast our minds back to Operation Pawan. If you remember in Jaffna, what happened? You think the LTT was wanting to give up these weapons immediately to hand it over to us? We were being naive to think that 72 hours we could disarm the LTT. This is not going to happen here. Hamas, the day they hand over their weapons, and of all things to hand over their weapons to the IDF, this is something almost impossible. No one is going to be even thinking about it, right? Hamas is going to retain. There may be some token kind of a surrender of weapons or whatever it may be, but Hamas is going to maintain his weapons. My last one or two issues. Remember, in all these years, the Israelis, with their fantastic surveillance, their military capability, could not prevent tunnels being established, infrastructure being established, a whole supply chain from Iran up to Gaza, over the land, over the sea, could not stop it. Do they think they're going to stop it now? I don't think so. It's something very, very difficult. I know that the Levant area is today no longer under the control of proxies, but still, I think the international issues are such that these kind of supply lines continue to remain. Hamas is still fighting. Where has it got its ammunition from? Where has it got its weaponry from? Those tunnels are destroyed, but they say the tunnels still exist. So for Israel, even a military victory doesn't seem to be completely evident at the moment. And without all this, to see the ceasefire emerge into a peace process is something very difficult for me to imagine at this moment. I stop there.
Oh, thanks a lot, sir. Very important points you brought out, and I'd like Ambassador Trigunayat to take it forward, and especially the issue which he did bring forward. The body chemistry of both Hamas and Israeli is not committed to each other. It's not committed to peace. It's more committed to fighting. Continue to fight and cause infringements on the whole side. There's no commitment to cause to peace. So in that thing, will the ceasefire convert into a peace? That's the million-dollar question. I'll come to the other issues. I'd like your views on that, Ambassador.
Thank you, sir. It's a pleasure again to be on the Gunner Shot and with Casa Forum. And I fully agree with what General Hasnain, General Shankar, and General Moorthy said. Absolutely true about this. But let me go back a step, 2 steps back, actually. This whole thing, why Trump came into so much of action the second time, is a very serious strategic mistake that was committed by Israel was to attack Qatar. And that is where the whole region got into a very different kind of a wine, and the Americans came under tremendous pressure. President Trump was extremely unhappy with the way things were going, but then he put his foot down and then he said that there has to be a stop to it. He tried the first time, but first time it was decorative because he was about to become the president. So he insisted there should be some kind of a ceasefire. And as expected, the ceasefire went away. He also, because he provided full security to Qatar now, I mean, this is the one country with which they have really signed an agreement that they will go ahead. Of course, I don't trust that in case Israel again attacks Qatar, that Americans are going to bomb Israel. It will never happen. But at the same time, this has given a lot of comfort level to Qatar, a small state, which is also hosts the largest base of the Americans. And Qatar has been shortchanged twice. Once allowing the Iranians to respond to the American attacks by allowing in Al-Udeid, the same place. And second time, the Israelis were able to do it despite everything. And so therefore now the faith in Americans has completely been jeopardized and there's really nothing there. It has been totally transactional, and I fully agree with General Hasnain on that. Nobody has sympathy for Hamas or Hezbollah or any other groups as far as the major Arab states are concerned. But that has been the pretext that the Israelis have taken all along for pounding the Gazans through a carpet bombing campaign. They said, everybody is Hamas there, that means. And we have seen that what kind of statements have been coming out of the leadership. President Trump has been wanting some kind of a peace, but he has, if you see these 20-point plan and read them carefully, it is totally a one-sided affair. It is just to placate and put the security of Israel keep being uppermost and giving all the handles to them to withdraw from it, to pound them again, to go in again, and that is why it is unlikely to hold. Of course, Hamas has also taken a beating very badly. It is not in a position to continue at the same pace, and especially now that they have handed over all the live hostages. Now, the dead hostages in that kind of a rubble to look for, identify, and give it back is a theoretical question. But this theoretical question, this is what Israel will make into an issue all the time. Today, they have agreed to give 2 more. So, total about 10 or 12 bodies. Now, everybody knows how the war happens. I mean, you are not looking for dead bodies of the hostages or prisoners to keep them for exchanging. I mean, this is unexpected. And there are many groups there, not only 40 groups that are working and have been part of the Hamas. Now, many of them are keeping these bodies also, may not be keeping them, just leaving. They will save themselves rather than saving the bodies. So this is going to be a point of concern for the ceasefire that we are looking at. Secondly, we have seen that there was a tremendous diplomatic isolation for Israel because many of the European countries, especially France, led by France, Spain, and others, they had created a very major pressure. And this pressure also because you remember that when Netanyahu had to go to US for the UNGA, he could not fly over many countries. They said if he flies over, they arrest him. Now, today, Canada has also said that if he comes ever near here, we will arrest him. So the ICC warrant is likely to be executed. There is tremendous pressure. So the Americans did realize that it is going to be increasingly difficult for Netanyahu to save himself. He, of course, is likely to come to India in December, and that we know about this. So this was the situation that the biggest diplomatic isolation for it. General Hasnain talked about the United Nations. United Nations is one organization that Mr. Netanyahu holds in great disdain. His ambassador even mentioned in New York that this organization must be bombed and they should not be there. So we have seen that kind of thing. He has stopped UNRWA. He has stopped any kind of relief supplies coming through them, calling each one of them as this. So we are not looking at a situation which is going to be very comfortable. The worst thing is why it will not succeed. There is no inclusion of Palestinian Authority or Palestinians as such in the whole management. This is a Tony Blair plan which has been approved by Trump and his son-in-law Jared Kushner, basically, who worked on it earlier also, coming out from that his initial peace plan, all these things. But there is no mention about what is going to happen to Palestine as a two-state solution, or will there be a Palestine at all? So there is no justice, there is no peace, there is no accountability, there is nothing in this whole thing. It is only just to somehow secure a sort of a hanging ceasefire, which will be very fragile. And then try to convert it into some kind of a Riviera. Of course, now I believe that Netanyahu is also saying that he's going to hold elections. We'll have to see what kind of a government comes to power there, which will also or decide whether we are going to have any kind of uh, a peace in the region. But at the moment, everybody is trying to buy this. I believe the Egyptians, the Qataris, the Turkish, they are going to provide some kind of a stabilization force apart from the 200 soldiers that the Americans have committed for this ISF. But they are not acceptable to Netanyahu. He doesn't like the Turkish forces to be there. They are having their own problems in Syria. So there is a trust deficit with everybody. Now, who's going to provide the kind of forces you are looking at? Indonesians? Who? I mean, that is something that we'll have to see and how it will carry on. Not they asked for India. India refused, as you know, for providing until and unless it's authorized by the United Nations. And
Right.
so that is the only solution, sir, I would say. And we are not looking at any kind of a sovereignty for the people of Palestine. So situation is more of the less, more of the same is likely to happen in very near future.
Thank you, sir. I thought you brought out a lot of points. The thing which I get is everyone wants peace, but no one is committed to getting peace, and probably no one knows how to get hold of it. And they've hashed up something called, the transitionary, the Tony Blair model to oversee this authority, a transitional authority, and all that. And I don't know where it's going to go. And anything to do with Tony Blair is always suspicious, just like his WMDs were, and he led the Iraq War. I mean, we're not going back, right? So, with all this, where do you see all this is going? Do you think this transitional authority will be able to do something, and do you think something cogent will be coming? Admiral Chopra, sir, your call.
Yeah, good evening, everyone. Can you hear me firstly?
Yes, sir, we can.
Okay, happy Diwali to all my fellow panelists. And thank you for your opening remarks. You know, I do believe also that this particular truce is fragile, but then all ceasefires to begin with are fragile. There are continuous violations and they settle down after some time. I'm a bit of an optimist. I think this will hold primarily because now the Arab and Muslim states of the Middle East want it to hold. I think they are equally tired of the violence and of Hamas, to be frank. Now, I try not to be judgmental about history or about each side's claims, but it's a very polarized topic with a lot of emotionalism. We should try and look at it purely analytically and realistically. Now, as someone said, Trump certainly deserves credit for getting this done. He is the man in the arena, so to speak. We are commentators and analysts sitting on our armchairs, giving our personal points of view. On the ground, that region is difficult, and it took some force of personality, if nothing else, to get people to gather and sort out a sort of truce, which has now happened. Now, there are many people who don't want it to hold also, maybe on either side. But like I said, I believe that because of the hostages release, because of the general trend towards liberalization in the Middle East, and for a host of other reasons, there is reason to believe that this particular ceasefire, this particular truce, may be helped along by the main players in the region, including perhaps Saudi Arabia, as we go along. So, you know, as someone said, did anyone win? Did anyone lose? In which war does anyone win or lose when you look upon it from the human angle? But this particular, should I say, violence over the last few months has certainly left Israel in a dominant sort of military position. Again, I'm not judging good or bad, but that is the situation on the ground. And for the first time since 1979, Iran is of little consequence, at least for the time being. Iran was very much present during the Oslo Accords. The threat from Iran, from its proxies, was ever present. I think for the first time, we are seeing a situation where the Iranian threat and Iranian proxies may have become irrelevant, even if it is for a short time. Now, nothing succeeds like infrastructure, as they say. So, if they manage to get this rebuilding off the ground in some short time, then I think it will give momentum again and impetus for peace. And I would think that would be on the list of things that they want to get done. And yes, of course, you need the international stabilization force. But if it comes from Jordan and Egypt and Turkey and perhaps even Iraq, it would be of considerable use. That this whole area would be stabilized by a military force from Arab and Muslim nations. It's only the Board of Peace, so to call Board of Peace, which would have the elements from outside the region. And maybe if you're optimist, even that will eventually do its job and go away, and maybe not. But I think again, like I said, my views are mostly optimist. I also see the region from beyond the immediate Israel-Palestine perspective. Syria is stabilized to some degree. Lebanon is stabilized. Iraq is stabilized. Iran is not a factor. It's only the Houthis now in Yemen who have the continued capacity to destabilize. And maybe that will also last for only a short time. I do believe, of course, that the Palestinian people need their own state, and I am for the two-state solution. I keep wondering, and others like General Hasnain, who've been there longer, I made a few trips to Gaza, but I couldn't figure out for the life of me where the second state would come about because it's unlikely to be in the West Bank. So if it has to be, it has to be either partly of southern Israel and partly of some other areas. And that is going to take a long time. Now, so I suppose some of these intractable sort of problems, like the Irish problem or other problems, take centuries. And I also believe that this is not going to go away in a hurry, but maybe the degree of terrible violence that we have seen may be reduced. Also, there are, for whatever reasons, there is less great power rivalry in the region. Russia is not even a factor in Syria. It's lost its naval base. It's just partly in control of an air base. The Chinese are there, but they are not there. They're not yet capable of sort of impacting this region by force, and they just have an outpost in Djibouti. So it's pretty much a U.S. Scene at the moment, and perhaps sometimes that makes it easier for getting something done. The next week or 2 weeks, when we are looking at this truce very carefully, is a terrific couple of weeks for the world at large. There is the prospect of a Putin-Trump meeting in Budapest, of a meeting with Xi in South Korea, of the East Asia Summit, and of Trump's announced today that he is going to Takaichi, the new prime minister in Japan. Now, why I mention this is all these will impact the affairs in the Middle East in its own way. The equations between Russia, China, and the US will also willy-nilly have an impact in the area. I'll just end up by bringing your attention to India. Now, this Middle East is very important from India. Maybe I say it as a naval officer. It abuts the Western Indian Ocean and is completely, it can disrupt our energy security, our trade, and many other things, and including providing a sort of foundation for any military activity against India in the future. So we need to look at this carefully. We are already threatened by a Pak Chinese military fusion. We now have Saudi Arabia and Pakistan in a sort of alliance. We have Turkey and Pakistan more or less in an alliance. And so our interests in the Middle East, all of us, all of you, are certainly aware of how negative trends here could impact us. Uh, we had a lot of we had a lot of plans for this area just a couple of years back. I2, U2, IMEC, INSTC, Chabahar, the works. We are nowhere at them, and it would be incorrect on our part to think that we have not suffered a sort of geopolitical setback in the Western Indian Ocean. And of course, this can be developed later into its various hues, including the maritime one. But to put it simply, we are pretty much alone and we are building capacity. I don't know how much will translate into capability, because certainly we have the means to increase capacity in terms of force levels and budgets, etc. But capability in terms of technology and in terms of some other things, we still have to be wary. Or because we are now, like I said, pretty much going it alone. If the Americans get the port in Pasni, then our business of land attack off the Makran coast is also something which will have to be weighed. All in all, it's a pretty, should I say, open-ended possibilities wherever one looks. But as I started with, I am optimistic. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, sir. You've given an optimistic angle to the whole thing, but the whole place is suffering from some kind of a exhaustion. This whole reason, in fact, 4 years of hard problems, right? Win or lose is we don't know who's going to win, who's going to lose, because this is not a problem which is going to end today. It's not going to end tomorrow. It'll take a long time to come ahead. But two things stand out in this whole thing, that the military dimension is important. Unless you have military dominance, you can't pave way for some kind of a peace. And unless Israel did what it did in the past, say 1 year plus, militarily by dismantling Hezbollah, dismantling Iran, and also dismantling Hamas the way it did, this also we wouldn't be discussing. We would still be discussing operations. And then, of course, the larger geopolitics, I think, is very important, which Admiral Chopra also spoke of. We talk a lot of that America is on the decline, this, that, and all that. But the fact is, in this one troubling region, you find Russia and China are more conspicuous by their absence, absence of many things. And you also find that Russia is put into a corner of its own kind with the Ukraine war going on, and much as what people say, talk much about China. China is also in its own hole. Today there's a fourth plenum going on, and there's not a single word coming out of it. Normally by now 26, 48 hours have gone by, and something should have come out of that fourth plenum. That's a troubling fourth plenum for China, and China is not as big as we all thought, right? With this kind of a sitting, we'll have to see where this whole story is going ahead. And I'd request in the second round where we go around, I would request each of you to focus on a question which I put across to you, and also focus on what's India's role going to be in it, because ultimately it comes down to our national interest and how does whole thing serve our national interest. I'll start with in the same order with Gen Gautam Moorthy. So can this whole story succeed without the UN, with this transitionary authority which is being put in place with Tony Blair at the top, and a thing where it's America and the Middle East who are putting this whole story together, with of course good old Britain doing whatever it is doing. Your take, sir.
You see, firstly, it's a very interesting question. But to give Trump his due, he has managed to get Israel to do something that we thought was not possible, that is to call a ceasefire, and he's got Hamas to return the hostages, which again uh, was not in the foreseeable future. It was not happening. We all thought that the hostages would die in captivity, but the fact is that the acceptance of ceasefire and return of hostages is just indicative of the kind of power uh, Trump and the US wields over Israel. The ambassador mentioned about the bombing of Qatar. I think that was uh, an inflection point in this whole war, because that forced, and take your mind back to the fact that the Emir of Qatar presented Trump with a Boeing. So when he picked up the phone and spoke to him, Trump actually would have, in his own manner, told Netanyahu, nothing doing, you will apologize to the Emir of Qatar and you will come for a ceasefire. I'll get your hostages back, but you'll have to do it. Look at the power he wields over Israel, and look at the power Qatar and the other countries, Egypt primarily, wield over the Hamas. And US and Qatar have worked very closely together on this. So, like Admiral Chopra has said, there is a lot of positivity that emerges from this. Israel has decapitated Hezbollah, decapitated the Hamas leadership. Houthis have been weakened. Israel has shown Iran what it is capable of. But let us not have any illusions. Israel has reached the point of strategic exhaustion. They also needed this ceasefire. It is not just face saving for them. They got the hostages back. That was what Netanyahu wanted. Now, even if some dead hostages do not return, I don't think this entire ceasefire process can be held hostage to that. Now, there was a brilliant essay which had come on, somebody had posted on Casa by Ramchandra Guha, where he quotes the Mexican Nobel laureate poet Octavio Paz, who was also Mexico's ambassador to India. And in this context, Octavio Paz said, Jews and Palestinians are doomed to live side by side. Look at the word he has used, doomed to live side by side. Now, both Hamas and the Israeli right wing, I'm not talking about the Israel population in general, I'm not talking about the Palestinians in general, I'm talking about the extremists on both sides, must internalize this or be forced to internalize this. Now, you've seen the power that US wields, you've seen the power that Gulf states wields. So, as General Hasnain mentioned, I've also seen that film on the Oslo Accords, brilliant film. And the Oslo Accords can be a foundation for a just and a workable two-state solution. It has to be hammered out. Israel had agreed to it, and you know what happened at the last minute when Yasser Arafat made that statement also, I don't want to be responsible for, of giving up this cause. But no Palestinian group, assuming even one worse than Hamas that could emerge, or an Israeli government, even one worse than what Netanyahu's can emerge, can destroy or finish the other side. Now, this is the realization that has to dawn. And therefore, as the dust settles, it is time from the Oslo models to go to the Dayton Accords model, lock these guys up in an Air Force hangar till they hammer out a two-state solution with inviolable borders and rights for the beleaguered Palestinian people. Enough of suffering, enough of this killing. Where India stands at the moment, yes, Admiral Chopra is correct. We are actually, we are in a very, very difficult spot geopolitically. But we have the goodwill of the Palestinian people. We have the goodwill of the Israelis. They understand us. The Palestinians understand us. The US also understands us. And I believe India can play a significant role. Under the UN, I do not know whether it will be a chapter 6 or a chapter 7. It correctly ought to be chapter 7, but then you will get drawn into a combat scenario which nobody wants. But a stabilization and a reconstruction force has to take charge sooner rather than later. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, sir. You've thrown up a lot of options. I now request General Hasnain. So I'll take you a little on a tangent because a lot of talk of the Pakistanis being part of the, ISF. And it is not one, in a couple of places it has been indicated that there's pressure on Pakistan to give a stabilization force. And it is also well known that part of that lunch, dialogue would have been about this. So, do you see Pakistan with its own problems giving a force for stabilization? One, and do you think Israelis will accept them? And in this context, do you think the stabilization force can make headway? And we should have to see how this affects us. Denuding of forces from Pakistan, especially with what they are yelling all around the countryside about, nuclear war and all that. Your views, sir. We can't hear you. You're muted at this. Unmute.
So sorry. Thank you. Wonderful discussion so far. Let me jump to this specific question of General Shankar before I come to some other things. Pakistan. Reminded of 2015, was it 15 or 14? 15. Raheel Sharif going as the head of the 39 nation Islamic counterterrorism force. What is ultimately what is everyone is looking at today as a potential Muslim NATO, right? And Raheel Sharif became its head. One of the things that they all thought by putting Raheel Sharif there was that the Pakistanis would probably send back a brigade. Remember, Pakistan had
Your
two armored brigade and 12 infantry brigade, two of them which both returned and became a part of the mechanized division in 5 Corps. And this is the force which they expected is at least a brigade will come back. The Pakistan army, or rather the Pakistan polity just refused. And of course, the deep state said it is the General Assembly which has refused to accept this proposal, etc. And not a single Pakistani soldier went to help the Saudis as far as Yemen was concerned. They did assist them to an extent in the sealing of the border and things of that nature. Ambassador Trigunayat will probably tell us more about it. So it's not as if the Pakistanis are waiting to jump into this entire thing. They also know the dynamics of this kind of an involvement in any part of the world, the Middle East probably being the worst of all. Secondly, the Israelis. Of course, the Israel-Pakistan relationship is a very awkward relationship. I somehow perceive that it's deeper than we think it is. There is an element of cooperation which is going on there. I have always been telling a story of how I met so many Pakistanis in Tel Aviv, and I saw more Pakistani students in Tel Aviv University than I saw Indian students there. Not saying that. I don't think the Israelis trust any element of the Pakistanis to come and be a separation force as far as Gaza is concerned. Because the Pakistan army has also got a reputation. They've got a certain amount, there's a degree of radical elements. So in fact, a fairly high percentage of radical elements who are there within the Pakistan army. And Israeli intelligence would know this entire thing. They would not want to have an awkward kind of a situation where you find an international support force of this kind which comes in and becomes one-sided, supporting the Arab side or the Hamas side. So they're going to be very careful about this. I don't know what we can do about it. We can ensure that we try and brief Israel. We should be in conjunction and advise them on these various aspects. I'm sure Israel would be seeking our advice too. But definitely a Pakistani element entering into the Middle East crisis at this time is not something which is very welcome for anyone. Pakistan itself perhaps very reluctant. It is only to draw some brownie points in Washington to pay back for the various luncheons that they've had, that they may wish to go ahead with it. But I don't think from any strategic angle this is of any benefit to Pakistan as such. That's number one. The second, 2, 3 things I'll just mention in addition. The two-state solution, to my mind, is very, very far away. We can't even dream of it at the moment. We can be optimistic, yes, but I think we are primarily at the moment looking at the short term and the interim. In both these periods of time that we are looking at trying to peep, I don't think a two-state solution lies anywhere. Secondly, there has to be a credible leadership within the Palestinian community. Mahmoud Abbas, Palestinian Authority, are at best a second best, right? Hamas has, of course, painted itself in a corner. There's no question of Hamas being acceptable to the Israelis or being acceptable to the world. This is the world of a new generation, and we are looking at Gen Z everywhere, right? From Madagascar to Nepal to Bangladesh to Sri Lanka and everywhere. Unless in the Palestinian community, and there are lots of well educated Palestinians internationally. After all, what happened in Afghanistan, also an attempt was essentially made to send in people educated in the West, most good Americanized English speaking people who came in as a part of the overall attempts to stabilize Afghanistan. Of course, it failed. That's a different thing. But I think we have to look at a next generation of people in Palestine. Without them, this thing is just, we are just going to flounder around. We are going to look for kind of solutions, but I don't think we are going to come anywhere near it. Russia and China excluded completely. I know the United States perceives that the world is unipolar even today, but we are now stepping a little beyond. In multilateralism, the unipolarity itself is really not existent today. I would disagree slightly with Adm Chopra and say the relevance of Iran. Iran will ultimately become the proxy of China and Russia. It will have its own proxies, and it will be in turn the proxy of Russia and China. Russia and China are not going to just wish away the Middle East completely from their scanner. They would want some kind of a say in the affairs of this very important part of the world. After all, energy, Chinese energy, most of it comes from here. And it's got deep interests. Otherwise, it's been very, very interested in resolving issues between Iran and Saudi Arabia. Not that it's succeeded in any way. Having said that, they will want always to have some kind of a hand in the geopolitics of the Middle East. And I can't foresee them just wishing this away and withdrawing from here. India, last bit on India. Our interests continue to remain the same. The diaspora, the energy issues, IMEC. I can recall, Ambassador Trigunayat will correct us, make it better. Will probably give us much more. The 2018 diplomacy, which carried on, was perhaps the best situation we had for India when we found Mr. Modi visiting Jordan, visiting Palestine, visiting Israel, Iran, the UAE, laying the foundations of the temple in Abu Dhabi, and all kinds of activities which went on there at that time. We don't want to lose out on this excellent kind of an outreach that we have had into the Middle East. So our relevance is very important, and our relevance must continue. I don't think the Saudi-Pakistani Accord agreement between them has in any way diluted India's importance as far as Saudi Arabia is concerned, and the rest of the Middle Eastern countries are concerned. But our efforts must continue to make sure that Pakistan does not get a foothold in such a manner that it is allowed to flourish in any great way in the Middle East. And one of the ways that it can flourish in the Middle East is to get a strong role in the ISF. This is something that we should work against and make sure that this does not happen. I stop there.
Thanks a lot, sir. You painted a very clear picture as to what Pakistan's role will be and where we have to go. Only thing I'd like to put across, and it came about a little earlier, that India probably is out of the equation and to an extent isolated, etc., etc. But the flip side of that story is that look, we kept our reserves going. There's still the reserve for everyone to be, get turn around. If things go bad, at some point of time, everyone starts looking at us. Whether we use that goodwill or not is a different story altogether, right? If things fail, they have to look at us. In this context, Ambassador Trigunayat, I'd like you to paint out how do you see the West Asian scene going ahead and where do you see India's role in it and how do you see Gaza settling eventually?
So, before I
Yeah, yeah.
comment on that, I just came across some few lines in one of the articles, and I think it is worth reading out. So, I would just say it says that the earthquake of Gaza has changed the grammar of the conflict. Israeli power, though brutal, is no longer absolute. Regional politics are shifting. A new order is being written, and those who wish to remain actors in it must learn its vocabulary. Otherwise, they risk becoming footnotes, remembered only for their refusal to adapt to the world as it remade itself before their eyes. I think it's a pretty good summation of the way things are playing out in this region. And I fully agree with General Hasnain that I always said that this government's foreign policy success, the best was basically in West Asia. But last few months have created bigger challenges for us. In this particular case, Israel is our strategic partner. So one of our strategic partner attacks another strategic partner and defense cooperation partner, which is Qatar, which leads our comprehensive strategic partner, Saudi Arabia, to sign up a mutual defense agreement with our strategic rival, Pakistan. Now, this is the kind of equation in which we are currently operating. All our strategic friends have eventually tried to make it more transactional. So I say that you have to work on your own, but at the same time, more and more regions, if you talk to the people in the region, they are still somewhat confused as to what we want in the region. We are talking about China. China is extremely relevant. China is so well embedded in the region, and it has cast its lot completely with the Palestinian cause, with the Arab world. It knows it. It's very much there. It is, if it needed, it can utilize it to its advantage at any time. Russia is also not out of the picture. You remember last week, Shara was there in Russia, and he has clearly told Putin and agreed that all the ports and everything, and we want to continue to work with you. So Russia is very much there. Today, it is not one but three bases in Syria which are continuing. Russia and Turkey, the relationship has moved in a very different dimension despite the historical. In Libya, they have created a new base. So Russia basically is focusing a great deal into the region. And as General Hassan said, that Russia, Iran, China, or I had once said Cryptarch, basically China, Russia, Iran, Pakistan, Turkey, Qatar, Afghanistan. These five countries, they'll eventually somehow are going to pose a big challenge for us. But today, with Saudi Arabia getting into it, and today Saudi Arabia is the only country, and that was one of the reasons in the beginning when General Hassan mentioned about October 7. I think one of the biggest trigger, apart from the Abraham Accords, was the statement after New Delhi by Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman that normalization with Israel will be faster than you expect. And that could have been one of the biggest, because if it had happened at that time, this would have been a death knell for the Palestinian cause completely, which was in any case becoming a sideshow. But today, Saudi Arabia has been forced to become the primary mover, overtly, covertly, and otherwise, of the Palestinian cause and the two-state solution. But anyway, we have to be hopeful, and we have to see that the region stabilizes for our own sake also, because we have, I always say this is an existential region for us, even more important than our immediate neighborhood. So we need to work there, but we need to be agile on our feet. We need to be up there talking to people, being sensible. Israelis trust us, the Palestinians trust. We may not have the levers, but we need to be seen to be relevant in the place. We need to be active. If we say we want peace, we need to be the peacemakers. Somehow, I mean, that is what is somehow is missing. But let's see how it eventually plays out. But I think that for the time being, as Admiral Chopra said, that there is hope, and there is going to be a reconstruction conference in Egypt again. And already Qatar has committed to about $1 billion providing that funding. And Qatar's role has been the most critical in this. Today, Qataris told the Hamas that if you don't agree to the dotted line, then your future in Qatar and support from Qatar is over, without which Hamas could not survive in any case. And the survival was continuing because of Israel's complicity, because Israel wanted a Hamas to counter the Palestinian movement. So there's a history in it which is all gets complicated and complex. The Palestinians do need a fresh leadership which is trusted. And that's why reforms are needed. And that's one reason I think that Abbas's government has understood that with the current dispensation, the role is going to be quite limited. Even though you remember he was the Sharm Sheikh, but not given much of the preeminence. The countries that got the preeminence were Qatar, Turkey, and Egypt under the US. But the important thing is we need to say, we might say whatever about Pakistani Prime Minister. We might say licking the boots or whatever it's. But he did what was best for him to re-entrench his position with Trump. And that's precisely what is causing all the lot of changes that are taking place in the region and could be impactful against our own interests. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Admiral Chopra, sir, now with the kind of optimism you painted and, where do you see this Abraham Accords getting into motion, and do you see this IMEC coming in, and do you see some positivity at the end of the day when, all this settles?
Yeah, I think I stick to what I said, and there are two or three reasons for optimism which have got nothing to do with America, China, or Russia. In my opinion, I think the Palestinians themselves don't want the Hamas anywhere around. I think one of the biggest forces which will be acting against Hamas will be Palestinian opinion. And that is something which, in my view, will slowly but surely rear its head as things become a little less violent. Secondly, in my opinion, Iran is down and will be for some time. And I do believe Mohammed bin Salman and Saudi Arabia will take the opportunity to quickly sign the Abraham Accord. Now, this is not really wishful thinking. This is something that I see which was put on pause and which is time is ripe for it to take place now. It may not, but these are the 2-3 reasons between the Palestinians, the Saudi Arabians, and the Iranians, which have created a situation which is giving us some hope. Now, as far as if I may comment on one or two things,
Please.
the United Nations, no one is talking about it. There's no talk of the UN peacekeeping force. It's an international stabilization force, which is basically going to be a coalition of the willing. Now, I don't know whether we should muck around in the middle of this force or not. I really don't know. We'll have to weigh the pros and cons, whether it's a good idea. But we should certainly not be doing it to hyphenate ourselves with Pakistan. If there's anyone really guilty of hyphenating with Pakistan, it is mostly us. And we should continue to doing what we were doing, strengthening our economy, becoming global in outlook, looking at our interests in Asia and an eye on China. And I don't think we should be drawn into this hyphenation in our own minds, even if Pakistan becomes a member of the ISF. A few clarifications. I myself, I'm not optimistic about the two-nation theory taking place in any short time. But what I did say was that has to be the final solution. But it cannot be just talked about without geographical coordinates. I think the first discussion is, where will the second nation actually, what will it occupy? And we are far away from that, of course. All in all, it's far from Oslo 1992. We quickly forget how the world has changed, especially in the lifetime of our generation, 1992, there was not even the PCs properly, let alone smartphones and the internet. And people, like General Hasnain mentioned, could quietly, work on a deal and get it through. Today, it's everything is there, right up there. It requires different type of leadership, different type of reactions, and for whatever it's worth, some movement has been made, and it without that movement, there was no hope in any case. Now, with this movement of this ceasefire, let's hope my optimism has some cause for coming to fruition. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, sir. I thought we had a wonderful discussion. As you can see, the situation is complicated. If you go in one direction, you catch hold of one tail, and that tail leads you to another tail and another tail. And I don't see a clear-cut solution or a way ahead. I mean, that's the case which has been there in West Asian politics for ever since we can all remember. So I don't know whether there is a road ahead, whether a two-state solution is feasible because it has got its own issues, right? And whether Israel will be able to live with peace is also a whole issue. Plus, this whole story being, put together by a system outside the UN, a system outside the UN. You saw that falling through in Iraq. You saw that falling through in,
Afghanistan.
Afghanistan. It doesn't work. And in this case, America is playing a lone hand with a set of people from the Middle East and a crook like Tony Blair, right, who's got his own interests at, the whole thing, with Europe not fully supporting this everything. I don't know how far this will be, enforced, whether it's a stabilization force or the transition authority and all that. But hope is eternal, and that's what we have on the table and nothing more. That's what's there in front of us. Right. As far as India is concerned, I agree with everyone who say, look, we must work to our strengths and our interests, and we don't get sidetracked, because I think this also gives us a time to build our own strength internally. I don't. I mean, I think this is also a nice opportunity for us to start sorting our internal problems out, because rather than trying to go out and trying to solve others' problems, we should solve our own problems, especially a little more in terms of the hard parts of our economy, investing into our own defense forces. If at all tomorrow you want to become a global power and the third or the fourth largest economy in the world, I think we need to have more teeth, and just not by sending a few ships here and there, but backing them up with more firepower, right? And that takes a lot of investment. And I think that's something which I've not touched on, but I'm commenting, and I'm very clear. Everyone here will agree that unless you have the punch to back what we say, we'll not be able to go where we need to go. I'm not going to take questions. We've all short time. I'd like to thank all of you, and I'd like to thank all the members who joined in Ghana Short. And with this, I'd request General Gautam Moorthy, sir, please wind up, and then we'll say Jai Hind to everyone, and have a great Deepavali going ahead.
Thank you very much, General Shankar. Thank you, fellow panelists, for this marvelous discussion. So we have said that the ceasefire marks the official end of the active war, but the instability continues. Let us just hope that the weeks coming will determine, we continue to, with vigilance, work towards a sustained peace. There has to be phased demilitarization. There has to be a transition. We just hope and pray that things work out for the better. One is always optimistic. Thank you all very much. Thank you, dear panelists,
Thank
for
you.
your patience.
Thank you.
And
Goodbye.
Jai Hind to everyone.
Thanks a lot, sir. Thank you, and Jai Hind
Thank
to
you.
everyone, and happy Deepavali to everyone. Thank you.
Happy Diwali.
Thank
Jai Hind to
you. Have a
everyone.
great evening.
Thank you.